And welcome back, macro econ students. We're looking at the loanable funds market in this discussion. And we're going to look at this really doesn't look any different than a supply or demand graph that we've looked at. So I always tell students, remember your old supply and demand, price, quantity. If the price goes up or the price goes down, it does not affect supply or demand. It only affects the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded. Same thing with interest rates. Interest rates act as a price. Do you want to borrow money at 10% or would you rather borrow money at 6%? Right? You're going to have a greater quantity of loans at 6% than you would at 10%, and vice versa. And then what would also affect the supply of loans, loanable funds available, right? So what would cause banks to have more money to loan, less money to loan, okay? And you can see here we have our contractionary monetary policy and our expansionary monetary policy here. And that is kind of showing you how this affects real interest rates. And there are some other things that will affect it, and we'll take a look at that. So let's look at the loanable funds market, right? So this market shows the effect on real interest rates. Demand, we know there's an inverse relationship between real interest rate and quantity demanded, just like I said earlier. Supply, there's a direct relationship between real interest rate and quantity loan supplied. Right? Banks want to loan more money at higher interest rates. People want to borrow less money at higher interest rates and vice versa. So the loanable funds available, this is not the money market model, right, where money supply is vertical. So here we go. We have our demand is downward sloping. We have our supply, it's upward sloping. And we have our real interest rates on our y-axis and our quantity of loans on our x-axis. Whoops. Okay. So that's what it looks like. It's pretty simple. There are shifters of the demand. We're going to focus mainly on crowding out and government borrowing. But here are the shifters, changes in perceived business opportunities, right? Changes in government borrowing, right? If we're running a budget deficit, meaning we're spending a lot of money, it will increase the demand. Budget surplus will decrease demand. Right, a supply shifter, so a change in private and public savings behavior. This is kind of where you get into supply side type economic things, right? Where people think that saving money is well, it is a good thing, but it's also a good thing in the sense that more funds or more savings, more money in the bank, decreases interest rates, and that allows investors and business people to borrow money at lower rates. A change in foreign investment. Are foreigners putting money in the banks here or not, right? A change in expected profitability, more money in the bank. Money made on interest, income, capital, income, capital gains, that type of stuff, is that going in the bank as well, right? So here's our loanable funds. Let's take a look at government borrowing. So what if the government increases deficit spending, meaning it spends more money than it has? Okay, so the government borrows from the private sector to do this, thus increasing the demand for loans. Now that is a shifter of demand, and that is going to shift demand to the right. Right, there we go. Now, you see what happens to interest rates. Now, some people might say, oh, well, I don't understand how that's crowding. Why is that affecting, mom and pop businesses? Why is that affecting consumers? So the interest rate goes up. Okay. This really isn't the new quantity. I know you think it is. It's the new quantity for government because government doesn't care, right? Government pays the interest rate. They don't care, right? That's... I guess you want to go back to Milton Friedman's sayings and things like that, where he's just like, government doesn't care. They're spending your money, so they don't care what interest rate they're paying, right? When you spend your money, you do care. Sure, but yeah, they do that, I guess, right? So, do you see a surplus? Right? Do you see where quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded? We have an unintentional price floor on our loans, right? And you can see it right there. Because really at this rate, this is where this is where the quantity of loans for consumer spending and investment spending would be. That is really where you've just increased it. So you've got the government borrowing here, right? At that, people would only want this, right? And so you have a surplus right here, right? You have this surplus, or basically a loss of borrowing right here from these individuals, right? The government's borrowing it, but these people are unable, and you're basically crowding them out. Right, one way of crowding it out is you open up a library and a Borders, geez, I just aged myself right there. Barnes and Noble or a bookstore or something like that can't compete with a free library, right? That's one way of looking at crowding out. Another way of looking at crowding out is, and more importantly, as economists we look at this, is you've basically just outpriced the loan here for your regular run-of-the-mill people. Right, who need to really have a low interest rate in order to borrow that. So how do you get, right? This is one of the effects of deficit spending right here, right? This is another problem with huge deficits, right? Last time I can remember we ever ran a surplus was under President Bill Clinton, and we were running surpluses. And so, we, as a government, we probably shouldn't spend more than we have. However, it happens. But, as deficit spending increases every year under every president, doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, we've seen some of the highest deficit spending under our Republican president, which is kind of funny because Republicans are usually anti-deficit spending, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? Okay. So that is the loanable funds market, and if you have any questions, let me know. Until